Welcome to Travel with Sean. I'm Sean. Today we are in Loket, Czech Republic. We're going to check out the village. We're going to check out the Loket Castle. Cute little town dating back to the 1200s, and the castle dates back to the late 1100s.
Locket sits on a peninsula surrounded on three sides by the Orzga River. The bend in the river gives it its name, meaning elbow in English. The town of Locket grew at the base of the hill on which the castle stands. Although the settlement here began no later than the late 1100s, the town was first mentioned in historical documents in 1234. Other than the castle, its most prominent feature is the town hall with its beautiful clock tower, which is an excellent example of Gothic architecture. We're going to visit the castle momentarily, but first, let's take a stroll down the cobblestone streets lined with colorful buildings. Like many towns in the region, Loket came under the ownership of Bohemian kings. Its location along several trade routes made it an important center for trade and commerce. This beautiful little town did not escape the early wars in the region, especially the Hussite War of the 15th century and the 30 Years' War in the first half of the 17th century, both being mainly religious wars between Protestants and Catholics. During the 30 Years' War, Loket was conquered and plundered by Swedish troops. Like many European towns, the wars caused significant destruction and economic decline here. After the 30 Years' War, Loket was restored to Bohemia and the Holy Roman Empire, entering a time of prosperity with massive reconstruction. From 1938 to 1945, it was occupied by the Nazis and became part of the region known as the Sudetenland. After the fall of the Nazi Third Reich, anyone of German ethnicity was expelled from Loket, as well as all of Czechoslovakia. Today, Loket stands as a picturesque town that attracts visitors interested in its medieval charm. The well-preserved architecture offers a glimpse into the town's rich history. While Loket may not have the historical prominence of larger cities, its story is woven into the broader tapestry of Czech history, making it a unique destination for travelers. Now we're climbing the hill to the Loket Castle, known as Hrad Loket in Czech. Built on a hill overlooking the river in the late 12th century, its strategic location made it important for the defense of Bohemia. It is one of the oldest stone castles in the country. During the Hussite War of the 15th century, Protestant soldiers twice tried to storm the castle, but failed because of its thick walls, giving it the nickname the Impregnable Castle of Bohemia. In fact, the only way King John of Luxembourg was able to conquer the castle was by tricking the guards into opening the gates for him by pretending to be on a social visit. The castle features a mix of architectural styles, reflecting the various periods of its construction, reconstruction, and renovations. The Celtic cross is likely from an ancient grave of someone visiting from Ireland or Wales. There are also many other grave markers lining a wall inside the castle. These are various grave markers that were found in and around the castle. One got my attention right away. If you see, this one is all in Hebrew, the language of the Jewish people. This person died in 1610, and there used to be a Jewish cemetery here. But at the end of the 30 Years' War, in the early 1600s, Jews were banned from Loket. This is the tomb of a man who died in 1607 while a prisoner inside the castle.
We're in the courtyard of the Loket Castle, which is on an island the shape of a locket. This small island has the castle and the town that developed outside of the castle. Archaeological surveys of this castle lead them to believe that it was built and established in the late 12th century. So that is late 1100s, just before the year 1200. They're not sure who the founder of the castle was. It could have been one of the kings of Bohemia at the time. The castle is located in the western part of the former country of Bohemia. We're about 3/4 of the way from Prague to the German border. This was a very important area in the 12, 13, 1400s because it's close to the city of Karlovy Vary, which in German was known as Carlsberg. It's also close to a town called Regensburg, and there are many other trading posts that existed in the 12, 13, 1400s in West Bohemia and in eastern Bavaria, which is just across the border in Germany. I mentioned the town just outside the castle that is also called Locket. That is believed to have developed in the early to mid 1200s. It was formally established as a town around 1250. And interestingly, the town of Locket is where King Charles IV grew up, where he lived with his mother Elizabeth. And they lived in this castle for a while. And during an invasion in the early 1300s, being invaded by the King of Luxembourg, King John, they hid in the castle. When King John invaded and conquered the castle, Elizabeth and her son, the young prince, were imprisoned here for a few months. Later, Prince Vaclav, who later became King Charles, who later became the Holy Roman Emperor. He grew up here, he was imprisoned here, he never came to hate this place. He still loved it all his life. And I mentioned nearby is Carlsberg or Karlovy Vary. He discovered hot springs over there. And that is why that town became famous and became popular, because of the hot springs that Charles discovered and went there with his royal parties to soak.
While you're in the castle, be sure to stop in to the museum to see the artifacts that are on display. Not just weapons and helmets, but household items also. These murals in the district Great Hall date back to the 15th century and the reign of King Wenceslaus IV, who was also known as King Charles IV and Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV, who lived here as a child. And this is some of the archaeological excavation that has been done since the 1980s. This area is believed to be the Great Hall. This room is the Great Hall, where they held banquets, dances, theater performances, weddings, and other celebratory gatherings. Next, we come to the ceremonial hall, with many important historical documents hanging on the walls. Going down just a few steps, we come to the office of the district margrave, the local ruler. This statue of Jesus dates back to between 1520 and 1530. Originally, it was located in the St. Wenceslaus Church in Locket, and then it was moved here sometime later. And the statue of Mary, his mother, they figure was carved between 1540 and 1550. Both are wooden statues. Both are about 500 years old. This mural on the wall of the ceremonial hall was painted in 1632. Ahead in the distance is Black Tower, which was the main watchtower and defensive position for Locket. There would have been several booths like these in the 18th century. Local farmers, artisans, and other vendors rented booths from the district margrave to sell their produce and merchandise. The courtyard was also where corporal punishment was given out. Offenders would be chained to the post and whipped.
As you can see, the castle looks pretty good condition. You would think it's in excellent condition, being about 1,000 years old. But the thing is, it was remodeled in the 1200s, possibly 1300s. It was remodeled again. The interior was remodeled again in the 1400s and 1700s. Some of that was in the courtyard, some of that was inside the building itself. The exterior walls of the castle are original from the late 1100s. Inside, they also have torture chambers because this was used as a prison in the 16 and 1700s. That was the major renovation in the 1700s, was converting it to a prison. In the 1600s and possibly before that, they did have prison or jail cells inside the castle. I think all castles back then had their own jail cell and their own penal system. But I've got to warn you, some of the scenes in there and some of the torture devices seem fairly grotesque. There is not anything horrific per se, but it's imagining, looking at the different devices and imagining what the torture was, what it was like. That is what is horrific. or understanding that this treatment of people existed.
Now it's time to check out the castle's prison and torture chamber. To get there, we must first descend a long, dark, and narrow flight of steep stairs deep underground. The prison cells were dark and damp with dirt floors. Electric light and smooth brick floors have been added for the safety and comfort of tourists. There was at least one fireplace on each floor to keep the prisoners from freezing to death. Some rooms had no windows. All or most of them held several prisoners at a time. Many had straw on the ground as a luxury for some prisoners. Being a jail, as I said, people were locked up until they were ready for their punishment. And they'd be locked up sometimes after punishment, after torture. So they might have straw to lay on. And this is a window where the guards can look through. Or they close it and nobody can see out. After visiting the prison cells, we now go upstairs to the torture chambers, where I will describe some of the prison's practices. So this is where they did waterboarding, more commonly in Spain in the 14th century. So this is the inquisitional chair. People suspected of heresy, witchcraft, or thinking themselves above their station would be put here prior to actual torture. And you notice that the armrests, no, they don't. Some of these chairs have spikes on the armrests, but you see the spikes on the seat. They have to position themselves above the seat. And a lot of times, under the feet, they would put hot plates, hot iron plates, sometimes under the seat, but on the seat as well. And they would sit here for hours while being questioned. This was more common in Spain and in Austria during the Inquisitions, especially inquiring of heresy. Another form of torture in the Middle Ages is called marking or burning. It was not for punishment, but it was to mark them, stigmatize them, so that people would know that they were a criminal, either a swindler, a thief, a blasphemer, somebody using the Lord's name in vain, a liar. Just a simple little mark on them. Maybe they would soak their feet or their hands in hot water or hot oil, or they would burn them with candles. The stocks or stockade was a very common form of torture punishment in the Middle Ages and even throughout the Renaissance. And sometimes even in the 1800s, it was common to put people in the stocks, either lock up their feet or lock up their hands, or maybe lock up the hands and the head. And a lot of times this was done in public places, so everybody could see. This concludes our tour of the castle's prison and torture chambers. I don't know about you, but I am glad to be out of there. Thank you for traveling with me. Please help me grow my channel by clicking like and subscribe. Until next time, thanks again.